So Skip, we've talked about leadership, but one of the important components which you talk about is covenantal relationship with the youth. And how does that play out within YG, and how does that culminate on the mission trip itself?
Yeah, thanks, Kendra. It's a great question. I think, if we have our three-legged stool, unconditional love and acceptance, clear and understandable covenantal commitments, and participation in something larger than yourself, you can see that each one of these has a dynamic of turning the empowered individual from focus on self to neighbor and God. Mm-hmm. So there's a spiritual dimension to keeping covenant, which of course is a tradition we've had that goes all the way back to Israel. But there's also a dynamic in terms of the health and safety and relational aspects of going on a mission trip and being in the pilgrimage life. And it goes something like this. I think I used to believe that all the good stuff in youth ministry, all the constructive things happened when you were on, let's call it, offense. Mm. Things were great, things were sailing well, and you could do constructive work in terms of ministry and education around the experience. And if you were thrown onto defense and you had to deal with behavioral disruptions or enforcement or guiding, setting boundaries, this was dead air, dead time, and loss. Mm. I think what I've come to understand is the better metaphor for a congregational life, and certainly youth ministry life, has more to do, if you're going for the metaphor, you'd say field position. It's as important to make progress on offense as it is not to get thrown back and lose ground on defense. So the very notion of behavior, you don't want to be a negative. You want to hold your ground and continue your community building. And I think there's a real distinction between whether that is cops and robbers, top-down, youth minister trying to police behavior, as opposed to whether the young people own the ethos, understand the ethos, and affirm the ethos. So what's evolved in our youth group is kind of an understanding that if we try to lock this down too tightly and it's external and imposed, we're almost asking anthropologically for the kids to go into recoil. They're adolescents. They are primed to fight the rules that they think are unjust, unfair, or too tight. If we can create the space for them to own the rules, then we not only do not get recoil, but we get identity and community where they own them as part of their identity. So the evolution of our behavioral covenant is to have conversations with seniors and then with the youth group around why we have this, what it creates as possibilities for us, why this nurtures the kind of love and relationship that we want. These are not negative tamp downs, these are empowering the kind of community that we want to be. Once you have that ethos, well, there's kind of a rubric that goes for most activities. You do in the game what you do in practice. So you can't drop these constraints on folks on the mission trip and never having talked about them or lived them during the course of the year. So I think the pattern for us is very early articulation about what our values are and what our covenantal boundaries of behavior are. We ask the children and their parents to sign covenantal behavioral commitments at the beginning of the year as part of their sign up for the mission trip. We live them out week to week in the way we act and behave with one another. And then, of course, they're instantiated in the mission trip itself. We start the mission trip on the orientation night with what we call the 10 Commandments of mission trip life. But the key here is the seniors present the 10 Commandments. The seniors own the 10 Commandments. The seniors have fun with the 10 Commandments by turning them into 10 skits about what the behavior is. And the difference in a mission trip life between having a youth minister and adult picket barking at the kids on how they're supposed to behave and seniors owning it as a point of pride that this is who we are is transformative. Just think, put yourself in the shoes of a freshman. All that has to happen is for a senior to look at you and go, that's not cool. That's not who we are. That gets change in behavior in a way that a long shouted recitation by a youth minister doesn't. So a youth group that owns the articulation and the ethos, seniors that facilitate it and lead it and teach it, and then seniors that model it when they go through their life. Now we've got a covenant that is generative instead of punitive.